Lakes weren't overly impressive in beating Waratah in last weekend's elimination semi-final, just doing enough to scrape through to tomorrow's minor semi. The Seagulls have a couple of injury problems, including Mike McKinnon, who has been named in the starting lineup but is very doubtful. Toronto, on the other hand, were comprehensively thrashed by Western Suburbs in the qualifying final and have axed halfback Paul Kennedy and promoted Mick Chant. The lower grades will feature Lakes, Waratah Mayfield and Maitland. Western Suburbs and South Newcastle do battle in the major semi on Sunday at Townsend Oval, with the winner moving into the decider for 91. These two teams have met twice this year with a win apiece, with 13 points separating them on each occasion.
Another week off is good for a side, I feel, at this time of the year, but we got one on West too early in the year at our home ground, so it's one apiece, and I'd like to think we're playing a lot better than we did when West beat us at Harker.
And even the Rosella's form last Sunday doesn't faze the Jones boy.
Very impressive, very confident and competent side, and obviously Neil's got them going, firing on all cylinders, and they're playing as a team. But Toronto pressured them early, and West showed a bit of effects of that, but Toronto didn't carry that game on. So I think if we can carry on an aggressive attacking game in all aspects of the game right through the 80 minutes, I think we can get on top of West.
Western Suburbs have scored some super tries in the last couple of weeks, and they have a licence from their coach to continue the trend.
If we can throw the ball around and score tries, I won't stop them from doing that. That's the name of the game, to score tries, and we certainly can do that.
While conceding that West are on the top of their game, Baker is very wary of the Lions' roar.
South, you can't afford to make mistakes, and you can't afford to give them too much of the ball because they're very good with it. And also with their defensive line, they keep a straight line all the time. They don't go up staggered, so it's going to be very difficult to score against them.
Can you make it 15 in a row?
I think we can. I think it's going to be a very difficult game. I think the bounce of the ball on the day will win the game.
And there's no doubt both teams would prefer to go straight into the grand final instead of fighting out the preliminary final.
I'd love to go straight through because all our guys, all they've been talking about for the last 3 weeks now is that grand final. And I think if you get there, you're there. If you sit back and say, well, we've got to play again next week, the nerves start building up, and I'd rather go straight through.
It will be a busy day for Western Suburbs and South Newcastle, with Lakes United playing in the third grade major semi-final.
Manager is on the Queensland Police's top 10 wanted list for questioning over the murders of 2 people in that state in May last year. His whereabouts were unknown to police until it was discovered he'd been arrested in Sydney last week while going by another name and subsequently released. A police backup check of the arrest revealed Manager's real identity, which was then made public by media reports.
Larry Manager was taken into custody this week but allowed to go free after giving a false name.
On the run for more than a year,
Manager was recognised at the Salvation Army hostel in Wickham, where he'd been since Monday. In the meantime, Manager had been involved in voluntary work at the Salvation Army's recycling depot in Hunter Street. Uniformed police arrested Manager at the hostel last night. He was taken into custody at Newcastle Police Station before a brief appearance in the local court this morning. Police alleged that on the 31st of May 1990, Manager murdered 29-year-old Wayne Mark Fletcher at Brisbane. No plea was entered and the matter was adjourned to be heard again on Monday. Manager was remanded in custody. Detectives from Brisbane are on the way to Newcastle, where it is expected they will seek Manager's extradition to face charges for 2 murders in that state. Andrew Lobb reporting for NBN News.
Travelling north along the Pacific Highway Link Road at about 8:50 this morning, the woman is thought to have fallen asleep at the wheel. Her small sedan crossed onto the wrong side of the road and cannoned off a guardrail. The woman was thrown out a side window, landing back in the northbound lane.
We understand that several cars did pass by the accident scene immediately after. Those vehicles drove and continued on, with about the 4th vehicle stopping with a lady to offer assistance to the driver of this vehicle.
A passing motorist eventually stopped and tried to help the woman, but she died just as police and ambulance officers arrived.
The The serenity of this Russian Orthodox church at Wallsend is a world away from the turmoil and uncertainty gripping the USSR. But for the 300 members of Newcastle's Russian community, scenes like this from the Soviet streets bring home a fear that for some is all too familiar.
Members of the community have families there, friends there, and some members of our community is there visiting Soviet Union at this present moment.
Mrs. Lupish says making contact with those in the USSR is difficult.
I believe that some people have tried to keep in touch with their friends and relatives, but I haven't spoken to any members at this stage.
The local Russian community is concerned that in its homeland, the recent gains of perestroika and glasnost are not the only things that could be lost. The members are also worried that their centuries-old culture and churches just like this one could once again be torn down. While the region's Russian population fear for their loved ones, some local business people have watched their trade prospects disappear overnight. A Caves Beach company called Banlaw was negotiating $1 million a year contract to supply customised fuel nozzles to a Soviet mining vehicle firm. But General Manager John Warland says after the hardliners' coup, 5 years of negotiating is now
water under the bridge. We spent a lot, we've been to Russia, we stayed in Russia. We were invited to come to Russia, which was the only way to do it. But all those expenses that we've incurred, well, there's nothing we can do about it.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Former Australian Open champ Jack Newton could slay the entire Knights team single-handed. Coach David Waite found it impossible to stay on the straight and narrow, and so did his players. Mark Sargent was too powerful on the putting green and headed for the beach from the tee. Michael Hagan couldn't lead by example, and even our own Micro Bit was having trouble coping with the gale force conditions. He burnt the worms along this fairway in a bid to avoid the wind. At least that was his excuse. Recovering from a recent arthroscopy, Stevie Fulmer was the only one to show any sort of driving form. Robbie McCormack wrapped his rapidly healing thumb around a club, but his mind was on the reserve grade clash with Illawarra.
It just comes down to us winning and going from there. Like if we get the win, well, we're assured of at least either third or a playoff for fifth, so as long as we win, that's the big factor.
Not so lucky is Giants second rower Mike McLean, who will miss only his second game of the season due to a cartilage complaint.
I was aiming to get to 22 games and I'd missed one, and it would have been great to finish against Illawarra, especially with a win.
Perhaps they should replace him with this big fella. Big Dog joined the Knights at the ISC last night to give the kids from Camp Quality some special memories. The youngsters ambushed their heroes with autograph books. The players were only too happy to surrender.
You may see something there which will be of particular interest to you.
Mr Hawke's suggestion of a new public works project for the Hunter has amounted to a $3.8 million renovation of the Customs House in Newcastle. It's the only definite commitment to an injection of funds. But that's hardly a new project, considering it was announced by member for Shortland Peter Morris in May this year. The budget confirms Newcastle could take a slice of the millions set aside for the Better Cities program. But to the disappointment of many in the local business sector, there are still no promises. Students at Newcastle University are coming to terms with a $144 per year increase in the government's higher education contribution scheme, which will bring the annual fee for an average student to $2,250.
There was no warning at all. The government, in fact, promised when it first introduced HECS that it would never increase it, except by the CPI. And it's already been increased at the beginning of this year by the CPI. Then we've got this added load again, and then again at the beginning of next year it's going to increase by the CPI yet again. So it's a sudden burden out of the blue that students just weren't prepared for at all.
Mr Cantrell is sceptical that the extra revenue will filter down to students and achieve the government's objective to ease overcrowding. He also believes the increases to AusStudy will not ease the burden for the majority of students.
It seems like they're giving a little bit with one hand and taking away a whole lot more with the other. So much for the clever country, which they keep talking about, I suppose.
Alison Peters, NBN News.
A packed auditorium was further proof that the Tooheys Cup Newcastle Rugby League competition has emerged from the shadows of its Winfield Cup brothers, the Knights, to once again be an integral and important part of the city's sporting profile. Western Suburbs had a big night. Their president, Wayne Hoare, accepted the Mal Woolford Trophy for winning the club championship by a big margin, and all three grades have advanced to the grand finals on September the 1st. The Rosellas also picked up the Ted O'Sullivan Trophy as joint minor premiers in first grade, sharing the award with South Newcastle. Souths also were in a winning mode as their captain coach Richard Jones capped a fine season so far by being named the Coach of the Year ahead of West Neil Baker. Then the announcement that everyone had been waiting for, the Player of the Year, and Jeff Jay had the honour. Price finished a clear winner with 31 points, 6 ahead of his nearest rival Kevin Ma from Toronto. Price has been in scintillating form all season as a member of the Newcastle side that won the country championships and for his club. His match against South in the major semi-final was brilliant, and the modest halfback last night was quick to praise the efforts of all his clubmates at Wests.
From first grade through to third grade, mate, it's been tremendous. The harmony within the club is good. Everyone gets on very well, and just something like this caps it real off.
Already in the grand final, Price doesn't mind who he plays in the decider.
As Mel said on the radio that I hope it's a draw, and I hope you both bash hell out of each other.
Sooner or later at work or in our everyday lives, we're confronted by computers, and rather than just learning to cope with them, school children are learning to control them. Students from 6 local schools were chosen to spend 2 days learning the finer points of computer handling from an expert in the field. Scott Merrilees is a programmer with BHP and is helping the children to bridge the gap between following and giving commands. What can be considered a fearsome task by some, both young and old, is fun for these students.
We all had to pair up with someone. People who had a bit of experience had to pair up with someone that didn't have much experience. It's fun.
They're fun and they're interesting to experiment with. I like to experiment and see what I can draw, telling them what to do.
Do you find computers as frightening as many of us sometimes feel that they are?
No.
Some local service stations are already out of fuel. Dealers expecting deliveries on Wednesday when the strike broke out have been hardest hit. Even if normal trading prevails, at least half the city's fuel supplies are expected to dry up over the weekend. Some owners are likely to cut back their trading hours to conserve fuel. But while station owners say buying has picked up, they maintain there's been no panic. Today, many service stations were all but empty. Demand is expected to increase over the weekend and on Monday. The Service Station Association says petrol will still be available on Monday, but predicts the situation will be grim. There was little the 9 employees of Like New Appliances could do this morning. Last night, fire gutted the store and blackened all 200 fridges and washing machines, leaving them worthless. At the back of the building, another business, Nadran Refrigeration, was also destroyed. Around $30,000 in equipment and tools were ruined, leaving the employees without work. Fire officers were surprised at how quickly the fire took hold in the building. They were forced to don breathing apparatus to get inside. Fearing arson, detectives checked the outside of the building, looking for any sign of forced entry. But it wasn't until daylight that police and fire investigation units were able to comb through the remains, searching for clues to help them in their investigation. For owner Raj Bandari, it was a devastating setback to 12 years of business.
I built up this business gradually, and we are trying to give service to the people here.
But Mr. Bandari says he won't close his business. He believes he offers a service which the people of the area need.
We are committed. Number one, I can't sit idle at home. Secondly, this is like thing I enjoy, I do, and that's life.
There are about 5 hectares of old car and bike parts spread around the centre ring and exhibition halls of the showground. 7,000 bargain hunters are expected to pass through the gates this weekend, each with an eye for those hard-to-find parts that just can't be bought off the shelf anymore. There's everything from nuts and bolts worth just a few cents through to an offer of $50,000 made to the owner of this restored 1929 DeSoto. Some found carry-away bargains in a supermarket of spares. The demand for nostalgia has also prompted a range of reproduction parts, from the ornamental to an entire fiberglass Ford Roadster body. Priceless hours of work go into restoring old cars, and these collectors are passionate about their hobby. The race is on to find that rare and complete original.
Perfect conditions prevailed for a parade, and leading the procession the West Wallsend Soccer Club, who only yesterday began the centenary celebrations with a brilliant 4-1 win over Newcastle Croatia in the elimination final of the Northern New South Wales Federation First Division. Westie have a very proud history in the game of soccer, one of the founding bases for the code in Australia, and this afternoon played neighbours Wallsend for the Centenary Cup. As with every sporting club, their future is dependent on the juniors, and they were more than happy to take their place in the parade, along with many other sporting codes from West Wallsend. Not only were clubs within the town recognised, but the pioneering tradition of the area was a feature of the march, enjoyed by youngsters and senior citizens alike.
About 100 Cessnock parishioners were saying their prayers with even more solemnity than usual today as they protested against the planned sale of 2 of their churches. St Michael's at Wollombi and St Patrick's at Norcabar have been tagged for sale by the Maitland Diocese of the Roman Catholic Church. The congregations took their hymns to the streets outside the home of the Bishop of Maitland, the Most Reverend Leo Clark.
Those 2 particular churches are our heritage, they're our past, and we think they're our future as well.
The protesters got no further than the front door when they sought answers from the clergy as to why the churches are to shut. Both churches are scheduled to be auctioned Saturday week, but these angry parishioners say they're going to keep up a protest campaign to ensure what they call their spiritual homes don't go under the hammer.
Well, we're desperate. We'll have another meeting today and decide on our next course of action. There will be more protests, peaceful protests, and we just hope that these bring a change of attitude from the bishop and the priest and the parish council in Cessnock.
Bishop Clark refused to comment on the issue. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Police were called to the stormwater drain at about 12:30 this afternoon, where they found the man floating face down near a railway overpass. The grisly find was made by local teenagers.
Okay, we were on our way into town going fishing this morning, and a friend of mine has gone ahead of me, and I've caught up with them, and they've said, come over here, we've got something to show you. So we've gone over, and he's pointed out the body floating in the water.
The area surrounding the drain was cordoned off while scientific police went about the grim task of retrieving the body and attempting to identify the victim. A police search of the man's clothing and the surrounding area has failed to find any form of identification. They're relying on fingerprint records and numerous tattoos on the body. Police say the man, who may have been a vagrant, was of thin build and average height. He had long fair hair and a moustache and was still wearing a black jacket, blue jeans and shoes. It's believed he'd only been in the water for several hours. This is the second body to be found in waterways around Newcastle Harbour in as many weeks. Police still haven't established the cause of death of 26-year-old pensioner Stephen Smith, who was found in Throsby Creek a fortnight ago. Late today, detectives said they weren't looking for a link between the deaths.
Not at this stage. We do propose to have a post-mortem held later tonight to establish cause of death.
Any sign of any injury to the body?
Yes, there is some injuries to the body, and that's one of the urgency in relation to the post-mortem.
Police resumed a search of the watercourse and surrounding land this evening. It's believed they may be looking for a weapon. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Perth were expected to dominate the match, but the Falcons flew high early to grab a big 10-point break. However, the Wildcats fought back to take the lead at half-time by a point. Former West Australian State League player Troy Trevelyan started to find the range. And Hansen, a super player on the night, regained the lead for the visitors. With a 4-point break at three-quarter time, Ricky Grace and James Crawford combined to stretch the margin. Peter Hansen was awesome in defence, denying the Falcons. But Michael Johnson found form to keep the Falcons in the game with only minutes remaining. The Alabama slammer made another big dunk to give the Wildcats the ascendancy and the win, while Trevelyan capped off a fine game with a big dunk to finish proceedings. Final score, Perth 108, Newcastle 99.
The Alcan Junior Wheelchair Sports Day is designed to show off the competitors' abilities, and there seemed to be plenty of that evident among the 30 young participants. Whether playing basketball or lining up for a race, the wheelies showed speed, manoeuvrability and teamwork.